Hello, friends. I'm KamalaDevi, and I'm going to offer a really unique interview today. I want to tell you about my friend, Katrina Vaillancourt, who wrote this book last season. So it's new and controversial. And the reason I'm uh, sharing this interview with you now is because I finally got the courage up. I interviewed her when the book first came out, and I recognized that uh, even though I'm used to talking about sex and kink and polyamory, like politics is probably even more controversial. And it was right before the election. And after our talk, I felt very raw and vulnerable, and not just in deep appreciation for her as a dear friend who's also a memoirist who's putting herself out there, but I felt vulnerable myself. Like, wow, if I align with my friend or share my friend's views, like, will that make me, target for concern and attack? I mean, it's that polarized in our communities, in our culture, to talk about politics, left, right. Like, my intention is beyond how we identify politically. Like, can we be in a conversation? And it's from that place that, as a memoirist, I wanted to interview my friend who went on a deep journey from the far left, crossing over into QAnon, which her book is about, how she tumbled down the rabbit hole of QAnon, and then she actually climbed back out. And she came out quite awakened. It's pretty profound, especially being with her during the elections, being with her throughout it. She has this really unique perspective about how we want to heal the polarization and the split, not just in the country, but in the world and in each of our hearts. And so it's from that place that I hope you can open your heart and, and hear a little bit about her writing journey. And yeah, thank you for taking the risk with me. So here's me and Katrina Vaillancourt. Blessings. Hey, Soul Tribe. I'm KamalaDevi, and I'm here with Katrina Vaillancourt. And we're going to talk today about her brand new, shiny release, which is excitingly a bestseller. And we were feeling into the controversy of this conversation because, as a writing coach, oftentimes I talk about sex and kink and poly and all these controversial topics, but I stay the hell away from politics for good reason. Like, sex is polarizing, but politics more so. And here you've written one of the most radically controversial books. So we get to talk not just about, the controversy of that, but what it means to be an author who's pushing the envelope, who's pioneering and doing so in a really heartfelt, compassionate, authentic way. So this is a really vulnerable and exquisite opportunity to look at how vulnerable writing is. So from that perspective, author to author, I want you to meet my very dear friend, like soul family. Katrina, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, KamalaDevi. It's wonderful to be here with you. And the way I usually describe myself is I am a certified nonviolent communication trainer. I love working with couples and families, and I have a special area of faculty inside of working with people who are in non-traditional relationship dynamics, having been in that realm for 17 years of my life. And so I love nonviolent communication. I love doing mediation work. And that's generally what's in the forefront when I'm introducing myself.
Yeah, and the subtext is that because you wrote this book, that's not at all about that. It's like you had to do your about the author from a different angle. But let's introduce your book first. Tell us about the title and a little bit about it.
Sure. So the book, this is an author's copy here, but it's Recovery, spelled with a Q, How I Tumbled Down the QAnon Rabbit Hole and Climbed Out. So 444 pages of my story here. Oh, definitely a can of worms. And it is also about nonviolent communication because it's so core to who I am. So nonviolent communication is woven throughout this nonfiction narrative memoir in a way that's really seeking to bring compassion to some very difficult topics.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so difficult. I just want a presence. I personally have had all of my own judgments about QAnon and about various conspiracy theories, and like the tender, beautiful day in which like we were catching up and holding each other as we do. And you were coming out to me about, hey, I went down this rabbit hole and had this experience. And we don't get to see each other so often. So it was like a deep coming out. And it was as vulnerable as if you were telling me that you were non-binary, trans, or like this is like so intimate and scary because it faces social stigma and rejection.
It would have been a whole lot safer to tell you I was non-binary or trans. It's more like trying to tell a staunch conservative Christian that I'm non-binary or trans. That might have started to come close to the level of fear I felt about coming out with the fact that I had tumbled down this particular rabbit hole, and primarily because the judgments and the assumptions against anybody who's ever fallen into QAnon are very, very harsh. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't know is that there's two main tracks of QAnon. There's the hardcore, and that's the one we hear about in the news all the time. That's where we're hearing about the violent areas. And then there's also the pastel Q. Those are people who are into natural health and protecting children, and generally people who are wanting a world that works for everyone, very idealistic is the word I'm looking for. So that was the area I was in, but it still is the QAnon narrative. And going back to writing a book, it was only 6 weeks ago that I decided I was going to put my name on the book. I thought I was going to write a pen name because my fear of coming out was that tremendous, even though I'd come out to all my family and my close friends.
Yeah. And I want to say this to anyone who's writing memoir, like that's one of the deep questions is like, hey, I want to tell my story. Do I need to, be associated with it? Do I want to show up for all of the judgment, or maybe I'll hurt people? And like, so that question of a pen name is a deep, hard one to ask. And as you say, it was just, a couple weeks ago that you made that decision. It has been, I understand, a real fucking sprint to get this book out. And it's so timely. Like that's your author's copy. So it just came out and it did really well with its big new release. Tell us a little bit about, that initial stages of like self-publishing and then promoting it.
Yeah, well, so self-publishing and promoting happens after 18 months of writing and editing and reviewing and going over every little detail, 100 times over, as I'm sure you've experienced. And I recognized that if I tried to go with a publisher, the process could easily take a year. So I had to find the right publisher, somebody I really trusted with this story, which is so personal and so vulnerable. And, the idea of trying to find a publisher who was willing to deal with this topic and to do so in a way that really worked for my feeling of vulnerability and desire for integrity was just too big an ask. So fortunately, self-publishing is relatively easy to do. I mean, you need to learn some things about design, about creating different file types so that you can do your hard copy, your EPUB, and your Kindle.
And I also want to mention what a good choice it is in your case, because your book is so timely. Here we are before the elections, and it's a really relevant conversation. And self-publishing is so much faster. It's just a direct link, and waiting for a publisher to go through its various channels and departments and then to sequence it in its catalog might be it's usually a year, before you
Mhm.
get a book deal to when the book comes out, honestly. So I'm so happy that in your case, you're like, hey, I've got my message. I don't want to go through the rejection or the, like all of that. And the world needs this now. So let's get it out now.
Definitely. All of those considerations were there. And, the people, I had over 24 people tell me I had to write this book. And in February, Sarah Nelson, who was a dear friend of mine, she's wife to Daniel P. Sheehan, who is a federal civil rights attorney who's in the news sometimes for his work. She understood that I had written a draft of the book and I was just sitting on it. Like, what do I do now? Do I dare actually put this out or not? And she said, you need to get this out as soon as possible. And I have just so much admiration and respect for this woman. She was headed for the National Organization of Women in the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a powerhouse. That helped to light the flame underneath me to start working with an editor and really cleaning it up to make
And
it
it
ready.
does take a village. Like, even if you're self-publishing is a deceiving word. Like, it is like a community effort to birth a book. And so you did work with an editor and you had like team and support and endorsements. And so I think it's wonderful. Like both the initiative, like you have to really self-manage yourself, but then that relationship, how'd you find an editor and how was that relationship?
I was really fortunate. I have a dear friend named Lori Masters who has been doing professional editing for a long, long time. And she is somebody who does not get swept up in political polarization. She listens to the narratives across the political spectrum, and she's also deeply steeped in nonviolent communication. So she had the ability to read my story, and rather than having aversion or triggers or anything to my rough copy, she was fascinated and really helped me refine the message, using nonviolent communication principles and making sure that my fact checks were as clear as they could be in the rampant disinformation we're all swimming in.
Oh my God. And I also want to say kudos to I worked with her on a draft of something I was working with. And it is a gift when you find an editor who says, how can I help you sing your song?
Yes.
As opposed to, this is what I think the world needs, or this is what I would do if I were you. It's like to actually help someone who's like, I'm here to empower and help you shine.
Oh, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Her enthusiasm, her giggling giddiness, and her mastery
Yeah.
with writing and with the English language is really exceptional. I actually have a family member who's a Harvard trained editor, and she's worked for the New York Times. She started reading my book and she said, this is on the level of a book that I would write and hand off for proofreading.
Wow.
Because it was so well written and refined. So
Wonderful.
absolute kudos to Lori.
Yeah. And so that's gold. When you find
Yeah.
a great editor, keep that, feed that relationship for sure.
Yes.
I I want to hear a little bit about in the vulnerability of the memoir, right? You're telling your story and coming out. But what was the hardest part, like for you in the writing process? What was hard? What was your biggest obstacle?
I didn't want to write the book. That in a way was the biggest obstacle. I mean, again, it's such a can of worms. Who wants to write about that? Who wants to associate themselves with this thing that is associated with violence and dark ideology? So my resistance was difficult. And then on top of that, when I was like, okay, I'm saying yes to this project, I had to relive it to some degree in order to write it. I was going through all of my old Facebook posts. I was looking at conversations I'd had, and I weave those direct conversations into the book. So you can see how through my experience, I'm wrestling with different issues and ideas and conversations with other people. And it just stirred up so much for me to revisit something that had been so difficult for me. But it also created profound healing and integration. because I didn't just sweep it under the rug. I didn't just keep it in the closet. It was like, oh, how do I actually work through all of this in a way that creates a greater sense of wholeness?
Yeah.
And because I have like all these dialogues, we were in lockdown. You know, my
Mhm.
journey in the rabbit hole was from June through December 2020. So we were all in lockdown. So I've got a lot of direct text and email exchange that I was able to weave into the book, which also creates a more holistic narrative, because it's not just what I'm going through and what I'm wrestling with, but you get to see really wise, impassioned arguments from other people in my life who are trying to reason with me in different ways. So I hope I have achieved bringing empathy and compassion to the entire framework.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a collective story. There's something, you're putting yourself on the altar and saying like, hey, I went through this radical reorientation of my identity and my belief system. And I'm willing to like shine a light on that, bring that into the light. But it's not just me, like this is happening in the collective,
Yes,
and it's happening. It's interesting that it was during COVID time, because that was also very intensely polarized time. Like it was,
absolutely.
like life or death, choose a side kind of moment. And then here
Mhm.
we are as a collective in a very similar moment as the elections are coming up. And I think part of the global collective transformation that's happening is we have to learn how to integrate polarity. We have to
Yes.
learn how to live with this immense duality in the
Mhm.
relative world. So what touches me as I feature you, because I had some resistance to like, wow, we're gonna have this conversation, and what are my viewers gonna think about me talking to someone in QAnon and has, but what touches me is your care for like, hey, can we cut through all the identity and feel the humanity in
Mhm.
where this person's coming from, what they want, that what they want oftentimes is the same things that we want. They just have different strategies.
Mhm.
And that's such a gorgeous message. And to put yourself on the altar to say that is peace work. It's really deeply
Yes.
peace work.
Yes.
All right. I think my camera glitched or froze. So I'm going to pause for a second. And we seem to be back. So I am curious, what is it that when you're being interviewed, oh, this is like a Barbara Walters question, like what's the hardest question for you to answer?
Oh goodness. The hardest question. I think any question where people want me to share a polarizing view or get in on the polarizing narratives, those are difficult because I'm really doing my best to be a bridge builder and not fall into those conversations. I can't help but to have my own view on everything. Everybody has been looking at what's happening in the world, and we all come to our own conclusions. Hopefully, with new information, we can adjust along the way. Certainly, my beliefs have changed over time, but that's the most difficult. Is if somebody wants to uh, try to get me into a polarized debate. I'm so not wanting to go there and trying to figure out how to bow out
Yeah.
of that and still have a point that is of value to the listener is
Yeah,
an
it's like
art form that I'm learning.
absolutely. So like as whether you're an interviewer or you're making a news clip, it's like they want drama, right? It's like, ooh,
Right,
where's the conflict?
right.
So
Unfortunately.
they come at you with pick a side, take
Yeah,
a stance, so
yeah.
that I can be the counterpoint. And then
I'm on the side of life and humanity. I'm on the side of nonviolence. I'm on the side of I love all people, and I'd love for us to see our common humanity. That's
yeah,
my side.
it's beautiful. And it's often like uh, seen as rosy glasses or
Sure.
Pollyanna, or like that's not newsworthy, or
Right.
and honestly, as a writer, I have to say this because so much of the time when I'm coaching other authors, it's like, where is the conflict? What are you wrestling with? Let's go to the heart of where the problem is. And then having been on a reality show where, of course, the world wants to see the drama, the jealousy, the chaos. And I'm like, I'm actually here to tell people there's another way to love.
Yes.
And if you do the nonviolent communication and the deep inner work, it doesn't have to be so fucking dramatic. Like it can be fulfilling and content, you know, and yes, you're going to grow and struggle along the way, but it's usually like human versus themselves as opposed to human versus the man or the machine or something
Some
else.
other, right. Yeah, it's something I love about you is you and I really deeply share those values. We have gone into relationship dynamics that have us explore our inner world and our ways to relate to others, and to find the highest love and authenticity and self-expression that is available. It's why I fell in love with you all those 12 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of you. And I'm also nervous for you. I mean, this is exciting. Are you getting any blowback or hate mail? I mean, I certainly, when I push the envelope or take risks, I certainly am, you know, no stranger to how hard it is to get that kind of feedback. How's it being received?
Thank you. Well, my platform is not as widespread as yours is. So my immediate circle has been very supportive. I've gotten incredible reviews. And so that has been very, very heartening and nourishing. Ironically, the place where I get the most lashback and some venom is that I also created a character on Reddit. And I say who I am. I'm, you know, forget the pen name. Here I am. And so I've tried to let them know, you know, I've put out this resource. I hope it supports healing. You know, Jamil Zaki, who is a PhD psychologist at Stanford, believes my message can support healing. So if you don't want to listen to an ex-QAnon, at least you can trust him and the top PhD trainers who have endorsed me as well. That's where I've gotten the most venom. Very, very little support on QAnon casualties, and a lot of
Want to double click. So rewind to QAnon casualties. What do you mean by that?
Oh, okay. So Reddit, of course, is another social media platform. And I discovered shortly after I was exiting QAnon that there was a sub or a page on Reddit called QAnon Casualties. It had been created by Jitarth Jadega, who is the person most well known for having exited QAnon and talking about it publicly. It currently has 276,000 members. And the stories on there are heartbreaking. And at this point, a lot of people have had friends and family members who have been involved in QAnon for years. And it's been so hard on their relationships. There have been a lot of divorces, a lot of families really going through tremendous challenges. And because there's really, I haven't seen any professionals who really know how to talk about this and bring about healing. So that's what QAnon Casualties is it's a sub where a lot of people have experienced trauma on the receiving end of being in relationship to somebody who fell down into this narrative.
Okay, so it's more about friends and family who have you know, are lost or grieving or impacted by QAnon, as opposed to QAnon like recovering from
There's almost no one.
Yeah, which is why
there's a recovery page.
Yeah.
There is a recovery page, and I've only found maybe a dozen people at most who have said to me, I'm also an ex-QAnon.
And what do you think that is? Is that like because of the staying power, people aren't, you know, getting out, or is it they're not changing, or is it because of like, hey, once that happens, there's shame and they don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to come out, or what's your sense of it?
I think that there's a complex of reasons. Certainly the shame is a significant one. For somebody to come out of it, they need to have a safe place to return to. And oftentimes that the polarization and the attacks that happen against people who have ever been involved in that ideology are so severe that they don't feel like they have a place to return to. There's much more safety and belonging staying on the side of QAnon, or at least Republican Trump supporting, than there is to return to a more liberal side of the aisle. So that's very significant. The way our media is so polarizing, and there's like media silos. There's the red silo, there's the blue silo, and then there's independent, and there's influencers and other things. And then there's AI-driven social media algorithms that create additional silos. Oh, you're interested in this? Let me show you more. Let me confirm your bias.
The bias confirmation turns into like an echo chamber, and
Yes.
that's all you're seeing and hearing.
Yes.
I hear that. Yeah. So I know that the content of your book deserves more time and attention that we have here, and this is really fascinating. So I want to encourage, that people get your book and read your book, and like I think that it is a unique message, and it is transpersonal in that even if it's not, if you don't have any family members around QAnon, like how do we as the heart of humanity heal this split? And it starts with trying to understand the other side, regardless of what side you're on, like trying to understand. And it kind of breaks my heart, as as liberal as I am, that we like aren't more warm and understanding and humanizing when this happens, that if somebody like in the recovery doesn't feel safe to come out of it and to share their experience. So I'm glad that you're an early spokesperson for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm as we wrap up, I'm wondering, what is the biggest message that you want people to take from your book, from your, this kind of mission that you're on now?
Yeah, I think in so many ways you just said it, is can we challenge ourselves to reach across the aisle and rehumanize people when our media has indoctrinated us into belief systems that dehumanize what is seen as the other side. There are the name calling across the aisle is over the top. And those names lead to beliefs that can perpetuate violence. So I'm deeply concerned at the way I see the media driving sensationalism and driving words of violence that then lead to violent actions. When I've gone across the aisle now. I didn't have any conservative friends really before this. I had a couple, but I was really struggling with them. Now I have a number of conservative friends. I have people who are voting for, the three major candidates and more, because they're not the only ones. And I love them all. I understand everybody's doing the best they can and believes that their candidate offers the best solutions. And ultimately, what we want is the same. We want a world in which we feel safe, in which we can thrive, our families can thrive. We've got clean air and water and food and shelter, and we're acting as caring citizens on a global planet. Ultimately, I believe that if we checked in with every human being on the planet, and we looked at what are their core desires, if they could allow themselves to dream again, because some are really disheartened by reality, that's what we all want. So the core message is, can we get past the name calling and the assumptions that create enemy images across the aisle, and instead reach out a hand and say, I care about you too.
Yeah.
And let's connect human to human, heart to heart.
Thank you. I want you to hold your book up again and tell us where we can get a copy.
Yeah, so a recovery, and you can get it on Amazon, of course. It's also on Kobo. It should be on other outlets soon. You can also go to recoverybook.com. That's my website, where you can get excerpts and, just check it out before you buy if you'd like, learn a little bit more.
Great. Thank you, Katrina.
Yeah.
I want to, in closing, I want to acknowledge you because what I'm touched by, I could like endorse and underline and like, I couldn't have said what you just said better. Like, I'm like, oh, it's really sweet that you're clear on this peace message. But bigger than the global peace, which I think, yes, I think we all like, I think that's something that people want, but how do we get there? Requires the kind of work that you've just modeled, which is I'm willing to die to my ego, not be so attached to who I thought I was, and to actually see someone who's willing to say, I was wrong, and I'm trying, different perspectives, and I can like not be so righteous so that I can like be humble and hear different sides, and to actually ultimately say, I don't know what's best for everyone, but I know love and kindness is the way to get there.
Yes.
And so I want to say that like Gandhi would be proud of you being the change, that you're wanting to see in the world. And it takes that kind of deep self-inquiry, reflection, and writing, especially memoir, is kind of like free therapy. It's like, it's not free, it's hard work, hard earned therapy, but you have to do the work inside first to change the world. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really been a blessing to be here with you.
Yeah, blessings, more soon. And I'll put details in the link of this so that you can reach the book, or KamalaDevi.com for more. Take care. Bye.